when Jessica texted me, "Mom, we had to cancel the family vacation. Money's tight right now. We'll plan something later when things improve." I believed her completely. I had worked double shifts all summer while they claimed to be struggling financially too. 3 weeks later, I opened Facebook and discovered the devastating truth. My daughter-in-law Sarah had posted pictures from a luxury Hawaiian resort. My entire family was there, Jessica in an elegant white sundress glowing under the tropical sun. Sarah wearing a designer emerald dress that cost more than my monthly groceries. My grandchildren Alex and Maya sporting expensive resort wear and matching sun hats. Even Sarah's parents, Robert and Patricia Williams, were in the group photo raising champagne glasses. Everyone except me. The caption read, "Perfect family getaway, memories to last forever." Those words pierced through me like shattered glass. I didn't scream. I didn't call them immediately. I didn't break down crying. I simply sat in silence, processing this betrayal while something fundamental inside me shifted permanently. 3 weeks after discovering their deception, my phone buzzed at 6:45 a.m. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, emergency, needs $7,500 urgently. Bank issue with our account. We'll repay you next month guaranteed." I read those words 7 times. Each word felt like a physical blow. $7,500. Always urgent, just like it had been for nearly 9 years. My hands shook as I typed 4 words that would change everything forever. Ask Sarah's family instead. Those 4 words cost me years of being taken advantage of, but gave me something invaluable, my self-respect back. Jessica called 18 times that day. I ignored every single call. Sarah sent me paragraph after paragraph of confusing explanations about misunderstandings and surprise plans. I deleted them without reading completely. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and closed our shared account permanently. I canceled all additional cards in their names. I blocked automatic transfers. For the first time in almost a decade, I could breathe without feeling suffocated. To understand why those 4 words held such power, I need to explain how a 74-year-old woman who worked her entire life became an ATM for her own family. How maternal love transformed into a golden cage I couldn't escape from. It began 9 years ago when my husband Robert passed away, leaving me with a paid-off house, steady retirement income, and modest savings. I was heartbroken, but Jessica seemed devastated. She was my only child, my purpose for living, and watching her suffer destroyed me. 2 months after the funeral, she visited with Sarah. They sat on my living room couch, the same couch where I'm remembering all this now. Jessica held my hand with that gentle touch she'd perfected since childhood. "Mom, I need to ask something difficult," she said softly. "Sarah and I want to throw Alex a special graduation party. You know how sensitive he is about fitting in. With Dad's funeral expenses and everything, we just can't manage it. Could you possibly lend us $12,000? We promise to pay you back within 6 months." I looked at Sarah. She nodded with that practiced smile. "Probably rehearsed beforehand. It's temporary. Helen, we want Alex to have beautiful memories of this milestone. You understand, right?" Of course I understood. I was the grandmother. I was supposed to understand. I was the one who'd just lost her husband and desperately needed to feel useful, needed to feel like I still mattered. So I agreed. I transferred $12,000 the next day. Alex had his party at an upscale venue with professional catering and a DJ. I sat at a corner table watching my grandson celebrate happily. They never repaid me. Never mentioned it again. I never asked. 6 months later came another request. "Mom, we need kitchen renovations. The appliances are failing, and there's a leak issue. $9,500. Then Sarah's vehicle because theirs broke down. $14,000 after that. Private college for Maya because public options weren't good enough. $48,000. $16,000 yearly for 3 years. Each time there was a compelling reason. Each time it was urgent. Each time it was temporary. Each time I opened my account and transferred money without questioning. Because that's what mothers do, right? Sacrifice everything. Give endlessly without expecting returns. Be the invisible foundation holding everything together. But what took me years and $65,000 to realize is there's a massive difference between helping and being exploited. between love and manipulation, between family and convenience. The early years after Robert's death were confusing. I was drowning in loneliness, clinging to anything that made me feel connected. Jessica knew every vulnerability, every weak spot in my widowed heart. She'd visit Sundays with Sarah and the kids, always with those long embraces that made me feel like I still had family, like I still mattered. "Mom, you look exhausted," she'd say, while Sarah made coffee in my kitchen like she owned it. "You should rest more. We're here for whatever you need." I felt fortunate. How naive, how blind, how desperately lonely I must have been not to see those visits always ended with requests wrapped like gifts. Jessica had mastered making her wants sound like family emergencies. She never said, "I want," always, "we need," never for her personally, always for the children, for stability, for the future. "Mom, Alex needs tutoring if we want him in a good university." "Mom, Maya needs braces immediately. The orthodontist says waiting will make it worse." "Mom, we need roof repairs. There are leaks that could cause damage." Every argument seemed reasonable. Every reason appeared legitimate. I, who had worked 54 years as a medical technician and hospital administrator, who had saved every penny with the discipline of someone who understood scarcity, opened my wallet repeatedly. Sarah was more subtle but equally effective. She never asked directly. Instead, she dropped poisonous comments disguised as concern. "Oh, Helen, it's unfortunate you can't join us at the country club for Alex's birthday, but I understand those places might feel too formal for you. It's sad Maya can't go on the class trip to Japan with her friends. Not every child has the same opportunities, I suppose." Feeling guilty for having money while my grandchildren supposedly lacked experiences, ended up offering help that was never directly requested but clearly expected. $3,500 for the trip, $20,500 for club membership, $150 for Maya's special graduation outfit. Small financial bleeds that accumulated into rivers of money flowing one direction only. There were warning signs I ignored, red flags I dismissed because acknowledging them meant admitting something too painful. Like when I drove past their house and saw a brand new luxury SUV in the driveway, gleaming with chrome details reflecting sunlight. When I asked Jessica, she claimed it was borrowed from a friend. 2 months later, I saw Sarah driving it, or when Maya posted photos from an expensive ski resort weekend. And I calculated that trip cost at least $5,000, just 1 month after Jessica told me they were struggling with cash flow. But I stayed silent. I swallowed doubts. I convinced myself I was misunderstanding things, that I was just a suspicious old woman, that questioning too much would cost me the only family connection remaining. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of complete solitude. Terrified that stopping the money would stop their visits. Terrified of becoming a forgotten elderly woman in an empty house, waiting for calls that never came. So I remained the generous mother, the involved grandmother, the one who always had cash available when needed. I settled for attention crumbs they threw my way, 10-minute weekly phone calls, monthly visits lasting under an hour. Grandchildren's photos I saw on social media because they never sent them directly. I smiled and claimed everything was fine, that it was sufficient, that I understood they were busy, but internally something was withering. Part of me was starving emotionally while my bank account drained. The breaking point started forming 6 months before the Hawaii trip, though I didn't recognize it then. Sarah organized a family dinner celebrating her parents' anniversary. I discovered this accidentally when Maya mentioned it during a brief video call. "Grandma, I can't talk long. We're preparing for Grandpa and Grandma Williams' party." I felt sharp pain in my stomach. Grandpa and Grandma Williams, as if I didn't exist. As if I wasn't a grandmother too. I called Jessica that evening. "Honey, Maya mentioned a dinner." "I wasn't aware." There was awkward silence. "Oh, right, Mom. It's just something intimate. You know how Sarah's family is, very close-knit. I didn't want you feeling uncomfortable, so we thought it better this way." I hung up feeling hollow inside. Not hurt, invisible. 2 weeks after that conversation, Jessica appeared at my door looking distressed. "I need to discuss something serious." "Mom." We sat in the living room and she perched on the couch edge, hands clasped like she was delivering terrible news. "The company is downsizing. There's a possibility I could lose my position. Sarah is extremely stressed. The kids need stability. We need a financial buffer for the coming months, something to help us breathe easier. She paused dramatically. Could you lend us $25,000? $25,000. The number hit me like a physical blow, more than she'd ever requested at once. Jessica, that's substantial money, I said, voice trembling. I know, Mom. Trust me, if I had alternatives, I wouldn't ask. But you're the only person we can depend on. You're our safety net, please. Her eyes had that frightened child expression that always melted my resolve. Once again, I surrendered. I transferred $25,000 on a Tuesday morning. I remember perfectly because I had to visit the bank personally to authorize such a large amount. The teller, a young man with kind eyes, asked me 3 times if I was certain. It's for my family, I explained. He nodded professionally. But his expression said something else, that mixture of pity and silent judgment reserved for older women who seemed too trusting. I signed papers without hesitation because I still believed I was saving my daughter from genuine crisis. I still believed the money was temporary assistance until better times. I still believed in the word family. Jessica called that afternoon, voice filled with relief. Thank you, Mom. You can't imagine the weight you've lifted from my shoulders. I promise this is temporary. 6 months, I'll repay everything completely. I swear. I hung up feeling useful, needed, important. What bitter irony. The following 2 months brought strange silence. Jessica didn't call as frequently. Her texts became brief, generic. Everything's good, Mom. Busy with work. Sarah stopped responding to family group messages. When I tried video calling the grandkids, they were always busy with homework, friends, or activities. I began feeling that horrible sensation of being a nuisance, of interrupting lives that functioned perfectly without me. One afternoon, I called Jessica directly. I needed to hear her voice, needed confirmation I still mattered to her. Mom, I can't talk now. I'm in an important meeting. I'll call back, she said hurriedly. She never called back. That night I sat in my kitchen with tea that grew cold, watching my silent phone, waiting for something I knew wouldn't come. It was Margaret, my neighbor, who made me start questioning everything. She was 69, also widowed, but possessed something different, quiet dignity, self-possession I lacked. One afternoon she invited me for coffee. Helen, forgive me for prying, but I've noticed you these past months, and you seem different, quieter. What's happening? Without planning it, unable to contain it anymore, I told her everything. The loans never repaid, broken promises, the feeling of purchasing attention scraps with $100 bills. Margaret listened without interrupting, her gray eyes focused on mine. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Helen, you're not a mother anymore. You're a bank, and banks charge interest, not just financial, but emotional. What are you receiving in return for everything you give? That question haunted me for days. What was I getting back? Rushed calls, obligatory visits, the privilege of being remembered only when money was needed. A week after that conversation, something small but significant occurred. It was Alex's birthday. My oldest grandson was turning 22. I had purchased a gift weeks early, an expensive leather briefcase I knew he'd appreciate. I called Jessica to ask about the family gathering time. Awkward silence followed. Mom, Alex just wants something small this year, only with his friends. You know how young people are now, but I'll give him your gift. Don't worry, I hung up feeling something new. Not sadness, anger. Anger that I wasn't even invited to the edges of their lives. Anger that Alex had celebrated 22 birthdays with my presence, several funded by me, and now I didn't deserve an hour of his time. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed bank statements systematically for 9 years. I had never done this because I feared seeing the total. But that night, I needed to know. I needed to quantify exactly what maintaining the illusion of mattering had cost. I created a spreadsheet and began typing. Alex's graduation party, $12,000 kitchen renovation, $9,500 Sarah's vehicle, $14,000 Maya's. College, 3 years, $48,000 roof. Repairs, $8,500 Japan. Trip, $3,500 club membership, $2,500 I. Continued adding, clothing, tutoring, medical emergencies I never saw bills for, repairs for things that never seemed to break. When I reached the end, The number glowed accusingly. $67,800, $67,800 in 9 years. I stared at that figure until numbers blurred. That represented my life. The exact sum of 54 years working, saving, sacrificing. What did I have in return? An empty house, a silent phone, grandchildren who treated me like an awkward obligation. A daughter who saw me as a solution to financial problems, not a person. I closed the laptop and something inside hardened. Like a steel door slamming shut in my chest. I didn't cry or scream. I felt strange coldness, icy clarity I'd never experienced. For the first time in 9 years, I wondered if maternal love had to mean self-destruction, if giving without limits was virtue or just cowardice disguised as sacrifice. A week later, the message about the family vacation arrived. Jessica called on Saturday afternoon, voice casual and relaxed. "Mom, I should mention something. We had planned a family Hawaii trip this summer, but we're canceling it. The economy just won't allow those luxuries. We'll postpone until next year when things improve." I felt something strange in my stomach, like a silent alarm. "What Hawaii trip, honey? You never mentioned it." "Oh, it was an idea Sarah and I had. We wanted to surprise you eventually, but it's better being realistic, right? No point going into debt now. We'll just have a quiet vacation at home." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "All right, Jessica. I understand." We hung up, and I stared at my phone with an uneasy feeling. Something in her tone wasn't right. The story sounded rehearsed, but I decided to believe her, to give one final chance that blind faith mothers reserve for their children even when evidence screams they're wrong. Summer holidays arrived, and I stayed home. I cleaned already clean closets. I reorganized old photographs. I cooked elaborate meals for one and stored leftovers until they spoiled. One afternoon, Margaret invited me to join a book club for senior women at the community center. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm not in the mood." She looked at me with that brutal honesty only true friends permit themselves. "Helen, are you waiting for your phone to ring? You're living on pause. That's not life. It's just existing." She was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. 3 weeks passed from summer's start. 3 weeks of almost complete silence from Jessica. No calls asking how I was. No simple texts checking if I needed anything. Nothing. Just emptiness that felt heavier daily. I tried convincing myself she was busy, that having vacation time required focus on family. But deep down, in that dark place where we store truths we don't want to face, I knew something was wrong. On Thursday afternoon, while making vegetable soup I knew I wouldn't finish, my phone buzzed with a notification. Facebook. I rarely checked social media, only installed it to see grandchildren's pictures, those small fragments of their lives I'd been reduced to. But that day, something made me open the app. Maybe intuition, maybe the universe pushing me toward truth I'd been avoiding. I saw Sarah had posted something 25 minutes earlier. My heart started racing and I didn't know why. I tapped her profile and saw it. The first photo showed her on a massive resort balcony with turquoise ocean behind her, wearing that emerald dress that must have cost a fortune. Her sunglasses reflecting paradise. A perfect smile. Too perfect. The caption read, "Perfect family getaway. Memories to last forever." I swiped to the next photo. Jessica was there in a white sundress, tanned, holding a tropical cocktail with decorative fruit and tiny umbrella. She looked relaxed, happy. Nothing in that image suggested financial problems. Nothing indicated they'd canceled the trip for lack of money. I kept swiping. Alex and Maya by the resort pool, wearing expensive resort wear sold in luxury gift shops. Another photo of the whole family dining at what appeared to be an elegant oceanside restaurant with white linens and crystal glasses. Then the one that completely shattered me. A group photo. Jessica, Sarah, Alex, Maya, and Sarah's parents, Robert and Patricia, all smiling, all toasting, all together. A complete family enjoying a perfect getaway. Everyone except me. I felt air rush from my lungs. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I looked at photos again, one by one, searching for logical explanation, some detail proving I was misinterpreting everything. But there was nothing to interpret. The truth was brutal and simple. They had lied to me. Jessica had looked me in the eye, spoken with that serious, worried voice, and deliberately lied. They hadn't canceled the trip. They had canceled me. They decided the grandmother who had financed their lifestyle for 9 years wasn't important enough for their perfect family getaway. But Sarah's mother was. She deserved to be in those photos. She was family. I was not. I counted the posts. 16 total. 16 moments captured and shared with the world. 16 pieces of evidence that my existence in their lives was completely dispensable. In one photo, Sarah posed with an elaborate seafood platter captioned, "When life treats you right." As if life had been generous, as if money for this vacation had fallen from heaven. I started calculating mentally. A Hawaii resort vacation for 5 people. Obviously, Sarah's parents were included. With the ocean view suites visible in photos, elaborate dining, decorated cocktails, I was easily looking at $12,000, maybe more. $15,000 spent on vacation while telling me they had financial problems, while asking me to understand they couldn't afford luxuries. I stood and walked to my window. My legs felt weak, like they belonged to someone else. Outside, the sun shone indifferently. People walked down streets living normal lives, while mine collapsed silently. I took my phone again, analyzing every detail with coldness I didn't know I possessed. The posting dates matched exactly the 3 weeks they'd been on vacation, the same 3 weeks I'd spent alone at home, feeling guilty for questioning their story, convincing myself I was a distrustful mother for doubting my own daughter. I zoomed in on one photo where the resort name was visible on a beach chair. I searched online. It was a luxury chain, advertising premium experiences, world-class dining, 5-star service. Definitely not a budget trip. I closed my eyes and tried breathing deeply, but air wouldn't fill my lungs completely. There was pressure in my chest like someone sitting on my ribs. It wasn't just the lie. It was the premeditation. They had planned this. They had consciously decided to exclude me. They had invented a complete story to keep me away. The worst part, they had posted it on social media. They knew I might see it, or perhaps, even more painful, they simply didn't care. Maybe I was so irrelevant they didn't even think about me enough to consider I'd see those photos. I sat down again, this time on the floor, back against the wall. The phone was still in my hand, photos still on screen. I thought about all the times I'd justified their behavior, all the excuses I'd invented to explain their distance, coldness, constant money requests followed by long silences. I thought about the 67-800, about every bank transfer, every cash envelope, every repayment promise that never materialized. I asked myself with brutal, belated clarity, had I ever been anything more to them than a resource? Did my daughter love me, or only what I could provide? Did my grandchildren truly know me, or only the grandmother who appeared with expensive gifts and financial solutions? The soup on the stove began boiling, and the sound brought me back to reality. I stood moving automatically, turned off the burner, and served a bowl I knew I wouldn't eat. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Jessica had made so many requests, where Sarah had drunk coffee while dropping her poisoned comments disguised as concern. In that heavy silence, I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't call them. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't give them the drama they probably expected if I discovered their deception. I was going to do something more powerful. I was going to stay silent. I was going to wait when they needed something again. And they would. They always did. When they came knocking with manufactured emergencies and convenient crises, my answer would be ready. But it wouldn't be the answer of the submissive mother I'd been for 9 years. It would be the answer of a woman who had finally awakened. I put my phone away without deleting photos, without blocking anyone, without making hasty moves. This time I would be smart. This time I would wait for the right moment. 3 weeks, I calculated. In 3 weeks they'd return from Hawaii, and only then would they see something had changed. The human wallet they'd relied on for 9 years had just closed forever. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling an ancient part of me die while something new, something harder and stronger, began rising from the ruins. The days following my discovery were strange. I continued normal routines, but everything felt different, like watching my own life from outside. I woke up, made coffee, cleaned house, watched TV, but none of it truly reached me. It was like being underwater where all sounds are muffled and distant. Margaret knocked on my door Saturday morning. "Helen, you look terrible. What happened?" She entered without waiting for invitation and sat on my couch with that familiarity only true friends allow. I couldn't contain it anymore. I showed her the photos one by one. She viewed them silently, her expression moving from surprise to indignation, to finally cold rage I'd never seen in her. "That ungrateful child," she said flatly. "Excuse my language, Helen, but this is unforgivable. This isn't carelessness, it's calculated cruelty." I nodded without speaking because opening my mouth would break me completely. Margaret stayed with me that day and the next. She didn't offer empty advice about forgiveness and family. She was simply there. She forced me to eat when I had no appetite. She made me walk in the park when I wanted to stay locked inside. Most importantly, she validated my pain without trying to minimize it. One evening, having tea in her apartment, she told me something that stuck in my memory. "Helen, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them more chances. You don't owe them more understanding. You don't owe them more sacrifices. You've given enough. You've given too much. Now it's time to give yourself what they never gave you: respect." Those words were like permission I didn't know I needed. Permission to be angry. Permission to cut ties. Permission to choose myself for the first time in 9 years. Exactly 22 days passed since seeing those photos. 22 days of absolute silence from Jessica. Not one text asking how I was. Not a quick call checking if I needed anything. Nothing. They were too busy enjoying their luxury vacation to remember the woman who had made their lifestyle possible. I counted every day. Not because I was anxiously waiting, but because I knew with absolute certainty that eventually they would need something. They always needed something. This time I would be ready. I prepared my response mentally hundreds of times. I practiced it in front of mirrors. I wrote it in notebooks. 4 words that would change everything. 4 words that would return my dignity. Ask Sarah's family instead. On the morning of the 23rd day, a Tuesday, my phone vibrated at 6:45 a.m. Jessica's name appeared. My heart accelerated, not with anxious emotion like before, but with something closer to a hunter's anticipation who had patiently waited for prey. I opened the message. "Mom, emergency, need $7,500 urgently. Bank issue with our account. Will repay you next month guaranteed." I read those words 7 times. Each one confirmed everything I had suspected. Not a hello, not how are you. Not a single question about my well-being after 3 weeks of silence. Only the direct, crude request without any attempt at disguise. $7,500. Always urgent, as if the past 9 years had taught them nothing except that Mom always says yes. Mom always opens her wallet. Mom always understands. But this mom had died 3 weeks ago in front of those Hawaii photos. This was a new woman who had seen truth and could no longer close her eyes. My fingers trembled as I began typing the reply, not from fear or doubt, but from an emotion I was slow to recognize because I'd never felt it directed toward my daughter. It was power. It was control. It was cold satisfaction of finally setting a boundary after years of being an open door. I wrote, "Ask Sarah's family instead." I added nothing else. No explanations, no accusations, no emojis to soften the blow. Just those 4 words. Send. The blue checkmark appeared. Message delivered. Then almost immediately, 2 blue checks. Read. I imagined her face. Initial confusion, then discomfort, finally panic when she understood something fundamental had changed. I didn't wait long. 30 seconds later, my phone started ringing. Jessica calling. I didn't answer. She called again and again and again. I counted 18 calls in the next 3 hours. 18 desperate attempts to regain control, to put me back in my place as the obedient, solution-dispensing mother. But I didn't answer any. Every rejected call was an act of personal revolution. Every ignored ring was a declaration of independence. I was shaking. I won't lie. Years of conditioning screamed at me to answer, to hear her side, to give benefit of doubt. But there was another voice, newer but stronger, reminding me of the Hawaii photos, reminding me of the $800, reminding me that I too deserved respect. At 2 p.m., A message arrived from Sarah. It was long, full of exclamation points and capital letters. Helen, I don't understand what's happening. Jessica is so worried. There must be some misunderstanding. Can we please talk like adults? The children are confused. You can't do this to your own family. I read the message with surprising calm. There was classic manipulation, making me the villain, making my refusal sound like an attack on family, as if I were the one who had broken something, as if setting a boundary after years of abuse was an unforgivable crime. I noticed she never once mentioned Hawaii. Not an apology, not acknowledgement of the lie, just indignation at my audacity to say no. I deleted the message without replying. That would drive her crazier than any words I could write. That same afternoon, hands still trembling but with determination growing every minute, I went to the bank. I asked for the same teller who had helped me transfer the $25,000. He recognized me immediately. How can I help you today, ma'am? I need to close the joint account I share with my daughter, I said. My voice sounded firmer than expected. I also need to cancel all additional cards in their names and block any automatic transfer authorizations. He blinked, surprised. Are you certain? That's a significant decision. I'm completely certain, I replied. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I filled out necessary forms, signed where indicated, and with each signature felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself I'd given away thinking I was purchasing love. The process took almost 2 hours. While the teller processed everything, I sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair feeling something strange. Peace. It wasn't quiet, warm peace from movies. It was something closer to silence after a storm when everything is broken, but the rain has finally stopped. The teller handed me final documents. The joint account is closed. The cards are canceled. They no longer have access to your funds, ma'am. Thank you, I said. Then, without planning it, I added, I should have done this years ago. He looked at me with sad understanding. Better late than never. Sometimes love makes us blind. I left the bank feeling I had abandoned more than just a bank account. I had left 9 years of being invisible, dispensable, valuable, only when money was needed. When I got home, I had 34 unread messages. Jessica, Sarah, even Alex had texted asking what was wrong with Grandma. I quickly reviewed them all. None asked how I was. None offered apologies. All demanded explanations as if I owed them justification for protecting myself. The last message was from Jessica. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're an adult. You can't act like a child just because you got upset about something. Call me and let's talk like civilized people. Reading those words, something inside me hardened even more. That's how she saw me. As a child throwing a tantrum, not as a woman who had been lied to, used, and deliberately excluded. Not as a mother who deserved minimum consideration, just as a money source that was malfunctioning and needed fixing with condescending words. That night, I sat down to eat alone, as I had for the past 3 weeks. But this time was different. I set the table properly. I used nice dishes I saved for visitors who never came. I served reasonable portions. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that horrible emptiness in my chest. I didn't feel like I was waiting for something that would never arrive. I was simply present in my own life. After dinner, I made tea and sat on my couch with a book I'd bought months ago but never opened. I read 3 chapters straight without interruptions, without checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for messages that would make me feel less alone. The phone was there, occasionally vibrating with new messages I systematically ignored, but it no longer owned me. It no longer dictated my peace. The following days mixed liberation with pain. Part of me felt incredibly light, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of stones for years and finally set it down. But there were moments of panic, that anxiety that comes when you break a pattern that, though destructive, was familiar. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, wondering if I'd done the right thing, if I was being too harsh, if a good mother would act this way. But then I remembered the Hawaii photos. I remembered the lie. I remembered the $67,800. The doubt dissolved, replaced by something more solid, conviction. Margaret came over every afternoon. Sometimes we talked, Sometimes we sat in comfortable silence drinking coffee. Her presence reminded me I wasn't crazy, that my reaction was completely valid. A week after closing the bank account, Jessica appeared at my door. She didn't call first. She didn't ask if it was convenient. She simply showed up on Saturday morning, ringing the doorbell insistently until I opened it. When I saw her standing there, still tanned from Hawaiian sun, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize and had probably bought in some expensive resort shop, I felt something I never thought I'd feel toward my daughter: coldness. "Mom, we need to talk," she said with that authoritative tone she used when wanting to control situations. I didn't invite her in. We stood there in the doorway, her in the hallway, me blocking the entrance. "Talk," I said simply. She blinked, clearly surprised by my lack of hospitality. "This is ridiculous. You can't just close the account like that. You can't ignore my calls. I'm your daughter." "Exactly," I replied with calm I didn't know I possessed. "You are my daughter and I am your mother. Not your bank, not your financial solution, not the person you lie to and exclude when convenient." Jessica ran her hand through her hair, a nervous gesture she'd had since childhood. "Mom, if this is about the trip, I can explain. We were going to tell you, but Sarah thought it would be better to surprise you afterward." "Surprise me?" I repeated slowly. "Surprise me by posting photos on social media where I could see them? Surprise me by lying that you'd canceled the trip due to money problems? Surprise me by taking Sarah's parents but not me? What kind of surprise is that, Jessica?" She shifted uncomfortably. "It was a misunderstanding. Things got complicated. You know how Sarah is with her planning." "No," I stopped her. "Don't blame Sarah. You called me. You lied to me. You asked me for $7,500 3 weeks after spending who knows how much on that vacation." Her expression changed. The mask of the worried daughter cracked, and for a moment I saw something ugly underneath. Irritation, impatience, as if I were an annoying obstacle that needed removing so she could return to normal. "Mom, you're overreacting. I'm asking to borrow, not for a handout. I've always paid you back. That was the final straw. That blatant, obvious lie so insulting to my intelligence." "Never," I said, raising my voice for the first time. "You have never paid me back a single cent. In 9 years, Jessica. 670, 800, I did the math. I have it all documented. Every transfer, every temporary loan that was never repaid. So don't you dare stand there and lie to my face again." Her face turned red. She seemed genuinely surprised I had kept records, as if she'd never considered I could be that organized, that aware. "That's different," she stammered. "That was for family, for the kids, for emergencies." "What emergency was Hawaii?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just looked at me with that mixture of frustration and disbelief, as if I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe the mother she knew, that woman who said yes to everything, who swallowed every story, who prioritized her needs over her own dignity, had died sometime over the past few weeks. "Mom, I don't know what's happening with you lately, but this needs to be fixed. I need access to the account. I need things to go back to normal." "No," I said simply. That word, so short, so powerful, hung in the air between us like a final sentence. There will be no more transfers. There will be no more loans. There will be no more joint account. It's over, Jessica. She took a step toward me, and for a second I thought she might yell, but instead her voice came out low, threatening. "You're making a mistake. You're going to end up alone, old and alone. And when you need something, when you're the one who needs help, I won't be there." "I'm already alone," I replied without emotion. "I've been alone for 9 years, ever since you decided I was only valuable when I could give you something. You know what? I prefer being truly alone than surrounded by people who only see me as a walking wallet." Jessica shook her head, her expression hardening. "You're selfish. After everything we've done for you, Sarah includes you in family gatherings, the kids call you, I visit. This is how you repay us?" Every word was a revelation. So my presence in their lives was a favor they were doing me. The attention crumbs I received were payment for my financial generosity. Not love, not family, just a transaction. "Leave," I said. My voice sounded tired. "Get out of my house, Jessica." She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps expecting me to break, to give in as I always had. But I held her gaze without flinching. Finally, she turned around. "You're going to regret this," she said over her shoulder as she walked toward the elevator. "I don't think so," I murmured when the door closed. I stood there for several minutes, processing what had just happened. I had confronted my daughter. I had set boundaries. I had said no. The world hadn't ended. The sky hadn't fallen. I was still breathing. I was still standing. I was still myself, only now with a little more dignity intact. That afternoon, Margaret knocked as if she had sensed I needed her. I told her everything. She held me for a long time. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "I know it hurts. I know it's hard. But what you did today was an act of self-love." We cried together, not exactly tears of sadness, but something more complex. Like crying for a version of myself that had died, a version that thought her worth lay in how much she could give, how much she could endure, how much she could sacrifice. Margaret didn't leave that night. She stayed for dinner, and we watched an old movie on TV. It was the first time in months I had genuinely laughed. The first time I enjoyed a moment without background anxiety, waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to need me, for me to have to be available. The following days were quieter. Jessica didn't return. Sarah's messages became less frequent until they disappeared completely. It was as if they had understood that this time I wouldn't give in. Or perhaps they had simply found another funding source and I was no longer necessary. Whatever the reason, the silence was relief. I started doing things I had postponed for years. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. I met other women my age who were also rediscovering themselves after years of living for others. One, Linda, had gone through something similar with her own children. We quickly became friends, united by that silent understanding that only comes from surviving the same experience. One morning, 2 weeks after Jessica's visit, I went to a travel agency. I had seen an advertisement for European river cruises, and something in me awakened. "I want information about this trip," I told the agent. A young woman with a kind smile. She showed me photos of castles along the Rhine, medieval towns, vineyards stretching to horizons, places I had always wanted to see but postponed because there was always something more important to spend money on. Always someone else who needed it more. "How much does it cost?" I asked. She gave me the price, $500 to $200 for a 12-day all-inclusive cruise. 6 months ago, that number would have seemed impossible to spend on myself, too selfish, too frivolous. But now, after everything I had been through, after finally understanding that my life also had value, that number seemed perfectly reasonable. "I'll take it," I said. The agent blinked, surprised by my quick decision. "Are you sure? Would you like to think about it?" "I don't need to think about it," I replied. "I've been thinking all my life. It's time to act." Booking that trip was the first truly selfish act I had done in decades. I say selfish without the negative weight that word had always carried for me. It was selfish in the pure sense, something just for me that didn't benefit anyone else, that didn't solve anyone's problem except my need to live before it was too late. I left the travel agency with documents in hand and a strange feeling in my chest that took me a moment to identify. Excitement. Anticipation. The feeling of having something to look forward to that involved no one but myself. I called Margaret from the street. "I did it," I said as soon as she answered. "I booked the river cruise," she screamed with delight. "Helen, I'm so proud of you. When do you leave?" "In 7 weeks. 12 days touring places I've only seen in pictures." We hung up, and I stood there on the sidewalk, smiling like a fool, feeling the sun on my face and thinking that maybe, just maybe, at 74, I was finally learning to live for myself. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I bought a new suitcase because the one I had was old and full of memories from family trips I never really enjoyed. I went to a clothing store and tried on outfits I never would have dared wear before. I bought a royal blue dress, cheerful, bold, completely different from the gray and beige tones I had worn for years to avoid drawing attention. The saleswoman, a young woman with colorful scarves, told me, "It looks beautiful on you. You look radiant." I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I liked what I saw. I wasn't the invisible grandmother. I wasn't the rejected mother. I was Helen, a 74-year-old woman who was choosing herself. I bought the dress and 2 more. I also bought comfortable walking shoes, a new camera for photos, and a journal to record my impressions. Margaret and Linda helped me plan. We reviewed maps, researched restaurants, made lists of places I couldn't miss. It was fun. It was light. It was everything my family gatherings never were. No hidden tension, no requests disguised as conversation. Just 3 older women excited about planning an adventure. One afternoon, while having tea in my living room, Linda asked, "Have you heard anything from your daughter?" I shook my head. Nothing. Complete silence. She nodded understandingly. It's better that way. Silence is sometimes the clearest answer. Are you worried they might show up while you're gone? The question caught me by surprise. I thought about it honestly. No, I finally replied. I'm not afraid of anything they can do or say anymore. That power is over. 2 weeks before the trip, something unexpected happened. I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Regarding Jessica and Sarah." I opened it with curiosity and caution. It was from Robert Williams, Sarah's father. The message was formal but direct. "Dear Helen, I recently learned about the situation between you and my daughter and son-in-law. Sarah finally told me about Hawaii and the circumstances. I want you to know I was unaware they had lied to you about the trip's cancellation. Had I known, I would not have accepted the invitation. What they did is unacceptable. You deserve an apology, which I suspect you will never receive from them. So I offer you mine. I also want you to know that Patricia and I will no longer accept anything from them that indirectly comes from your generosity. We have had a serious conversation with Sarah about values and respect. I wish you the very best. Sincerely, Robert Williams." I read the email 3 times. I didn't expect that. Someone from their side of the family having the decency to acknowledge what happened. I replied briefly, "Dear Robert, I appreciate your message and your honesty. I hold no resentment toward you or Patricia. I hope Sarah learns from this. Regards, Helen Patterson." It was strange. My daughter-in-law's father had more integrity than my own daughter. That irony wasn't lost on me, but it also gave me something like hope. Not hope that things with Jessica would improve, but hope that there were still decent people in the world who recognized when something was wrong and apologized even when it wasn't directly their fault. That was more than my daughter had ever done. The day before my trip, as I finished packing, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized it immediately. Alex, my oldest grandson. I hesitated before answering. "Hello," I finally said. "Grandma?" His voice sounded strange, nervous. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course," I replied, mentally preparing for some manipulative request. But what he said surprised me. "Grandma, I want to apologize. I know Mom and Sarah lied to you about Hawaii. I heard the arguments. I know they've been asking you for money for years, and I never said anything. I was complicit in my silence. I am so sorry." I sat on the edge of my bed processing his words. Alex was 22, an adult taking responsibility for his part in all this. That was more mature than anything his mother had done. "Thank you for calling, Alex," I said softly. "That means a lot to me." There was a long silence. "Grandma, there's something else you need to know. Mom and Sarah are in serious financial trouble. They've always lived beyond their means. I think they counted on your money as part of their budget. Now that you closed the account, they're panicking. They had to sell Sarah's car. They're behind on several payments. Instead of accepting they created this problem, they're blaming you." My heart hardened. So it was true. They weren't emergencies. They weren't temporary crises. It was a lifestyle they couldn't sustain without my money. "Alex, I appreciate you telling me this, but you need to understand something. I am not responsible for your parents' financial problems. They are adults. They made their decisions. Now they have to live with the consequences." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not calling to ask you to help them. I'm calling because I want you to know I don't think like them, that I understand what they did to you was wrong. And if you ever want to have a relationship with me independent of them, I would like that." Those words touched me deeply. It was the closest thing to victory I could expect from this situation. Not getting my daughter back, but maybe eventually having a real connection with my grandson. One based on mutual respect, not financial transactions. I would like that too. "Alex," I replied, my voice cracking. "Thank you for calling. Take care of yourself." "You too, Grandma." and enjoy your trip. Maya told me you deserve it. We hung up, and I sat there with the phone in my hand, crying softly. But this time they weren't tears of pain. It was something closer to relief. Validation of knowing I wasn't crazy, that my reaction had been justified. The next morning, Margaret and Linda accompanied me to the airport. I had my new suitcase, my royal blue dress carefully packed, my camera, my journal, and for the first time in 9 years, I carried something more important: hope. Hope that life still had good things reserved for me, that it wasn't too late to be happy, that 74 wasn't the end, but perhaps a new beginning. We hugged at the airport entrance. Margaret squeezed me tight. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered. "You'll come back renewed. Don't let anything or anyone take this from you." "I promise," I said, and I meant it. I walked through airport security feeling lighter than I had in years. Every step away from my old life was a step toward something new, something mine, something no one could take away because I hadn't bought it with their approval or presence. I had bought it with my own money, earned by my own work, for my own happiness. The flight was long, but I didn't care. I looked out the window at clouds, thinking about everything I had gone through to get there, the $800 lost, the lies discovered, the difficult confrontations, the boundaries set, and finally, this freedom. When the plane landed in Amsterdam, I disembarked with other passengers, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I wasn't worrying about whether Jessica needed something. I wasn't feeling guilty about spending money on myself. I wasn't justifying my decisions to anyone. I was just there, present, alive, ready for 12 days of discovery, not just of Europe, but of myself. Who was Helen when no one else was watching? When no one else was asking? When no one else mattered but me? The river cruise was a revelation, not just for the stunning castles or delicious food or history-filled towns. It was a revelation because I discovered I could be happy alone, that I didn't need my family's validation to feel my life had purpose, that at 74, I could still surprise myself. The first day sailing along the Rhine, I stood on deck until my feet ached. I watched vineyards roll past and ancient castles perched on hills. No one rushed me. No one asked when we were going to eat. No one complained about being bored. It was just me and the scenery and the comfortable silence of being at peace with myself. I ate at the ship's restaurant, where the waiter, an older gentleman with a warm smile, treated me as if I were the most important guest aboard. He recommended wine, told me stories about the regions we passed, and I laughed genuinely for the first time in months. In Cologne, I sat by the cathedral and watched families strolling, young couples holding hands, older people like me walking along cobblestones. Everyone seemed to be exactly where they should be. I took out my journal and started writing, not a structured diary, just loose thoughts. I have lived 74 years, and only now do I understand that my happiness shouldn't depend on making others happy. Giving until I was empty wasn't love. It was self-destruction. Real family isn't the one that shares your blood. It's the one that respects your heart. The words flowed effortlessly, as if I had been storing them for years, and they had finally found an outlet. A woman sat near me, German, with completely silver hair and deep lines around her eyes. She asked in accented English where I was from. "America," I replied. "Ah, American," she smiled. "Traveling alone?" "Yes," I replied. For the first time, that phrase didn't sound sad or lonely. It sounded like a choice, like power. She nodded with understanding. "Me too. My children want me to stay home, to wait for them, to be available when they need me. But I decided my last years will be mine." We looked at each other and shared something that needed no words, that silent understanding between women who have lived whole lives prioritizing others and finally decided to prioritize themselves. We talked for an hour. She told me about her life, her disappointments, her small acts of rebellion. I told her my story. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she placed her weathered hand on mine. "You did the right thing," she said simply. "Forgiveness is important, but self-respect is sacred." We said goodbye with a hug. I never saw her again, but her words stayed with me. In Vienna, I visited Schönbrunn Palace and climbed to the garden's highest point. The steps were steep and my breathing labored, but I didn't give up. When I reached the top, the view of the city took my breath away. Everything looked small from up there. My problems, my pains, my ungrateful daughter. Everything was tiny compared to the vastness of the world. I took out my camera and photographed everything. Not to show anyone, but to remember this moment, to have physical evidence that Helen was here, that she existed beyond being a mother, a grandmother, a wallet. A young couple asked me to take their picture. I did gladly. Then they insisted on taking one of me. I hesitated. I wasn't used to being the center of attention, but I accepted. I stood in front of the overlook with wind moving my silver hair, and I smiled. A real, unforced smile. When I saw the photo later, I barely recognized myself. There was something different in my eyes, something like freedom. Every city taught me something. In Passau, watching the three rivers converge, I understood that the most valuable things require patience and care, and I had spent all my patience on people who didn't value it, forgetting to build something beautiful for myself. In Budapest, soaking in thermal baths, I understood that nourishing my body and soul wasn't selfishness, it was survival. I had spent years feeding others while I starved emotionally. In each place I left something behind, not physical things, but pieces of the old Helen, the one who was afraid, the one who felt guilty, the one who thought her worth resided in her usefulness. That woman was left behind in every European city until only the new Helen remained, the one who knew her value, the one who didn't ask permission to be happy. Throughout the trip, I kept my phone in airplane mode most of the time. I only turned it on once daily to send a quick text to Margaret saying I was okay. I didn't check for messages from Jessica. I didn't look for social media updates. I didn't allow myself to be reabsorbed into that world that had consumed me for so long. It was liberating, like detoxing from an addiction I didn't know I had. The addiction to being needed, the addiction to feeling I mattered, even if only for my money. I was learning to matter to myself, and that was enough. On the last day of the cruise, our group had a farewell dinner in Budapest. There were 18 of us from different countries and ages. During dinner, the cruise director asked us to share what the trip had meant to each of us. When my turn came, I hesitated. I wasn't good at speaking to groups, but something pushed me to be honest. This trip, I began, my voice trembling, wasn't just about seeing Europe. It was about seeing myself after years of being lost in others' needs. I came here after cutting financial ties with my daughter, who was using me like a bank. I came here after deciding my last years were mine, not for people who only value me for what I can give. I discovered I can be happy alone. That chosen solitude is better than company that makes you feel invisible. So this trip saved my life, not literally, but it saved what was left of my dignity. When I finished, there were tears in my eyes and in the eyes of several people at the table. A woman from Australia stood up and hugged me. "Me too," she whispered. "I'm learning that too." We embraced like sisters in pain and healing. That night in my cabin, I finally turned my phone on completely. I had 57 unread messages. Most were from unknown numbers, some from Sarah, a few from Jessica. I opened one randomly from Sarah. "Helen, Jessica, and I are having serious financial problems. We had to sell the car. The kids are suffering because of your selfishness. I hope you're happy." I read the message without feeling anything. Neither guilt nor rage, only indifference. It was fascinating how someone could take zero responsibility for their own decisions. How they could spend money they didn't have on a luxury vacation and then blame me for consequences of their actions. I deleted the message. I checked a few more. All had the same tone: accusations, manipulation, attempts to make me feel guilty. But this time it didn't work. The part of me that responded to manipulation had died. I deleted all messages without replying. There was one message from Alex. It was different. "Grandma, I hope your trip is amazing. Mom and Sarah are mad, but that's not your problem. I started looking for a job so I can move out on my own. I don't want to be part of this dynamic anymore. When you get back, I'd like to see you without them. Just you and me. Take care." That message made me cry, but they were good tears, tears of hope. My grandson was breaking the pattern. He was choosing to be different. I replied briefly, "Alex, the trip was transformative. I'd love to see you when I get back. I'm proud of you for making your own decisions. I love you. Send. Then I turned off the phone again. Tomorrow I would fly back home, but I wouldn't be the same woman who had left. That Helen had stayed somewhere between the Rhine and the Danube. The one returning was stronger, more aware, more complete. The flight back was different from the outbound journey. This time I wasn't looking ahead with nervous hope. I was looking back with gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson learned, every boundary set, every time I chose my peace over their approval. When the plane landed, Margaret and Linda were waiting for me. They ran toward me when I emerged, and the three of us hugged, crying and laughing simultaneously. "You look different," Margaret said, pulling back to study me closely. "There's something in your eyes." "I am different," I confirmed. "I am complete." On the way home, I told them about the trip, the cities, the woman by the cathedral, the farewell dinner. They listened with the attention only true friends give. When we arrived at my apartment, something surprised me. There was a package by my door. It was wrapped in plain brown paper with no sender label. Margaret and Linda looked at each other cautiously. "Do you want us to stay while you open it?" Linda asked. I nodded. I didn't know what to expect, but their presence gave me security. We went into the apartment and I set my suitcase aside. The package wasn't heavy. I placed it on my kitchen table and opened it slowly. Inside were several things. First, a letter in a white envelope. Beneath it, all the cards I had given Jessica over the years. Birthday cards, Mother's Day cards, Christmas cards. There were also old photos from when she was a child. Her graduation, her wedding. At the bottom, a check. I took it out with trembling hands. It was for $6,000, signed by Jessica. In the memo line, first payment. I stared at the check for a long time, unsure how to feel. Margaret broke the silence. "Read the letter," she said softly. I opened the envelope. The handwriting was Jessica's, that slanted script I had known since she learned to write. "Mom, I don't know how to start this letter. I've written and rewritten these words for weeks. Nothing sounds sufficient. Nothing can repair what I did, but I need to try. You are right about everything. I used you. I lied to you. I treated you like a bank instead of my mother. The worst part is I knew it the whole time. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I knew we were hurting you, but it was easier to keep taking your money than face our own financial problems. Sarah and I were living way beyond our means. We wanted to pretend we had status we didn't. You were the one who paid for our vanity. Hawaii was the last straw, but honestly, it should have been any of the other 100 times I failed you before that. When you closed the bank account, I got angry. I blamed you. I told Sarah you were being irrational and vengeful. But when everything started collapsing, when we had to sell the car, when we fell behind on payments, when we faced real consequences of our decisions without your safety net, something changed. I started seeing what I had done. I started understanding the magnitude of my betrayal. I talked to Alex. He told me some very hard but very true things. He told me I lost you not when you closed the account, but years before when I decided you were more useful as a wallet than as a mother. He was right. This check is just the beginning. I know $6,000 is nothing compared to the $67,800 I owe you, but it's all I could gather by selling things and working extra hours. I plan to pay you $100 to $200 every month until I repay everything, not because I expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I continued reading. I'm not asking you to call me. I'm not asking us to go back to how things were, because that would be impossible. Frankly, you deserve better than how things were before. I only ask you to know that I finally understood. I understood I had an extraordinary mother, and I treated her terribly. I understood the love you gave me throughout my life was invaluable, and I repaid it with indifference and exploitation. Sarah and I are in couples therapy. I'm also going to individual therapy. We are facing our problems head-on for the first time in our marriage. It's painful and difficult, but necessary. The grandkids are also learning about financial responsibility and treating family with real respect, not transactional respect. I love you, Mom. I am so sorry I hurt you. Jessica. I folded the letter slowly and placed it on the table. Margaret and Linda looked at me expectantly. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. Part of me wants to tear up the check and tell her it's too late. But another part, a very small but persistent part, wants to believe people can change. Linda took my hand. You don't have to decide anything now. Let time show you if it's genuine or just another manipulation. She was right. I had learned during these months that not all decisions needed to be made immediately, that it was okay to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. I put the letter and check in a drawer. I would decide later. For now, I just wanted to enjoy being home after a life-changing trip. My friends stayed that night. We cooked together. We laughed. I shared photos from the trip, and for the first time in years, my house felt full in the right way. The following days were about readjusting. I returned to my routine, but it was different. I no longer spent hours looking at my phone, waiting for messages that would make me feel needed. Instead, I filled my time with things I genuinely enjoyed: the pottery class, walks with Margaret, coffee with Linda, and video calls with Alex, who kept his word and began visiting me independently of his parents. These visits were different. He didn't come with his hand out. He came with stories about his new job, with genuine questions about my life, with real interest in getting to know the grandmother beyond the role she had played in their dysfunctional family. One afternoon, he brought me flowers. "Just because," he said, "because I want you to know I value you." I cried because finally someone in my family was giving me something without expecting anything in return. That was real family. 6 months after the European trip, something changed. Jessica's check was still in the drawer, uncashed, but every week an envelope with $200 in cash arrived in my mailbox. No notes, no explanations, just the money, fulfilling her promise. We met occasionally for coffee, always brief, always with clear boundaries. Sarah and I maintained cordial but distant relationship. Alex and Maya visited me regularly, and without pressure from their parents, we had built something real. Margaret and Linda became my chosen family. We traveled together. We laughed together. We aged together without asking anyone's permission. I went back to Europe last year, taking Margaret with me. We visited the same places, but it was different because I was different, stronger, more complete, more mine. Today, 2 years after seeing those Hawaii photos, I am at peace. Jessica is still paying the debt. We're about $35,000 toward the $67,800. Our relationship is cordial, but it's no longer what it was. And that's okay, because I learned the most important lesson of my life at 74. Real family doesn't charge admission. Real love doesn't empty your bank account or your soul, and it is never ever too late to choose yourself. I didn't lose $67,800. I bought my freedom. I bought my dignity. I bought my peace. I bought the opportunity to live my last years without carrying the weight of others' expectations. If this story made you feel anything, if you identified with any part, if it made you think about your own boundaries or relationships, then my pain served something bigger than me. It served to remind you that you too deserve respect, that you too can say no, that you too can choose yourself without guilt. Because in the end, the only person you will live with your entire life is yourself. That person deserves all your love, all your protection, and all your loyalty before you give it to anyone else, even before you give it to family. Because if you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. And that is the hardest and most liberating truth you will ever learn.